Are you looking to get into a trading card game that's competitive of any nature, and you're like, well, I don't have that much money to start? Well, Pokemon TCG is just the game for you. The Pokemon trading card game is the cheapest competitive trading card game to enter and buy the cards for. Whether or not you want to just go to a local level event or go to an international level event, buying cards should not be an issue for you. And this is why. Today we're going to break down the differences between Pokemon, Magic, and Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm going to talk to you guys specifically about Pokemon and why it is the cheapest trading card game and the trends that it's showing to continue to be one of the cheapest trading card games for a long time. Now, before we jump into everything, please, I hope you guys consider subscribing and liking this video so I can make more content like this. It helps the channel out a lot. If you don't like it, well, I'll just work a little bit harder so I can get that subscription from you. Well, to start things off, we're going to look at the top 10 most expensive Pokemon cards in history. The Pikachu Illustrator card takes the #1 place. Then there's the 1999 first edition Shadowless Charizard. Then there's a Pokemon Blastoise Commission Presentation Galaxy Star Hologram. Well, and the list goes on and on and on. There's a lot of crazy things on this list, but the most important thing to note is that almost all of these are collector's cards. These are all cards that are limited print run, things that you might not be able to get outside of some very specific niche scenarios, and all of them are early 2000s, or, way back in the day. Now, there are a couple of exceptions on this list, like Pokemon World Championships promotional cards, which people didn't really realize the value of until recently, but those cards, well, you can qualify for the World Championships by playing in the Pokemon trading card game and have a chance to win those yourself. So, how can we do that, and how can we get there? There's something that I think people need to recognize, that Pokemon TCG's competitive chase cards are a little bit different compared to collector's chase cards. Now, if you're a collector, you're looking at buying some of these high-ticket, expensive alternate art rare cards, but as a competitor, you're not looking for too much. You're just looking for the most playable, basic arts of any given trading card to play in your deck. 3 to 4 copies, and then you're good to go. So I wanted to look at some of the older information before we jumped into something that's more modern, because I felt like it was important to talk about, hey, where was the game a few years ago, and why is the game so much cheaper now, in perspective? So looking at Pokegym.net, an old forum where a lot of players used to talk, you could see that back in the day that even 90% of the cards being dirt cheap and 8 to 10 cards needing a deck to function that are $50 to $80 each is pretty pricey. Even if that's, 8 cards at the very bottom at $50 each, you're still paying a pretty penny to build one competitive deck. And the unfortunate part about a lot of competitive decks in competitive games is a lot of the main cards do not overlap. Maybe some of the staples will, but most of the time they won't. You can see here in another post that another player was talking about how some of the more bulk EX cards were at these high prices, like $4, $6, $7, which is, considered low at the time. And what I mean by bulk EX card is it's something you would pull from a pack, and collectors don't want it, players don't really want it, they just kind of end up in your bulk pile to get resold or put away for who God knows how long. So now that we know where the game was even just 6 years ago, where has the game come to now that we're entering 2023? Well, you can see right here that those bulk EXs, rares that we were talking about, you can get them for under $1 for almost a majority of them. Ho-Oh V at 99 cents, Unknown V-Star 98 cents, Hisuian Arcanine V 30 cents. These are ultra rare cards, technically speaking. By the rarity given by Pokemon TCG in these packs, these are considered ultra rare trading cards. And these cards are now significantly less than $1. So if you were even wanted to try a Skunk Tank V deck out, well, that's less than $1 for you to invest to pick these cards up. And that seems like a pretty good steal to me. Now you can see here that even the most competitive card in this set, in the newest set, the Brilliant Stars or Silver Tempest expansion, Lugia V-Star, started off at its peak on release day around $35 to $40, but has very quickly declined within the first month to a $20 or less card. So even if you're picking up 3 to 4 copies of this Lugia V-Star, you are not spending more than $80 on this card total. It's currently at a $14.22 price point, and well, that's just making the game more and more affordable. And this is the peak of the expensive cards, mind you guys. This is where the ceiling is, not the floor, the ceiling. This game has gotten so much easier because of products like the Trainer's Toolkit Checklist, and I'll go into depth about these products in a second, but this is a product that Pokemon releases annually that has started about 2 years ago. It has 2 copies of a majority of staple trainers, supporters, and stadiums, as well as your special energy cards. So if you pick up 2 copies of this, you pretty much have the pieces to build any deck that you want besides the Pokemon. Now, these are the newcomer friendly products I wanted to talk about. In the last 2 to 3 years, Pokemon has been releasing more and more products geared to giving new players competitive decks right off the bat. They've introduced something called level 1, level 2, and level 3 products, which have replaced our traditional theme decks and all of these things that we used to have, and the level of the product indicates how competitively viable it immediately is. Level 1 products are typically just our old theme decks, where it's like, these are not really playable. They might have a couple of funny cards, but you can pick them up and play them. Level 2 products are semi-competitive, where like they're about half the deck is competitively viable, and well, they're still playable in a friendly manner. Level 3 products can pretty much be taken off the shelf and directly into a tournament, and you'd be fine. You'd probably be like 3 or 4 cards off of what a competitive player would be bringing with them, and that is something that's unheard of. I don't think any card game really does that besides Pokemon, and it's a welcome change that we've got. Trade art toolkits are about $29.99 that I mentioned earlier, and if you pick up 2 copies of these every year, you'll pick up almost all of the trainers, supporters, stadiums, and special energy that you will need for the upcoming year. Now that means that a lot of your top decks will use the same trainer engines like Professor's Research, Ultra Ball, Quick Ball. These cards are recycled in a lot of decks, so you'll be set to go for quite a while once you pick these 2 up. Well, most certainly for the next year at least. These are the level 1, 2, and 3 products, and you can see the price points here. The level 1 product here is a Lycanroc V and Corviknight V battle deck. Their theme decks have now become battle decks. You can pick each of these up for $14.99, and they come with a 60-card deck. Now, the 60-card deck is not that competitively viable, and there are a couple of trainers, supporters, and stadiums that you can take out of these and use, but nothing to write home about. At $29.99, you get the battle deck number 2, which comes with Rapid Strike and Single Strike Urshifu, which is a 60-card deck as well, but you get a 2/2 line of these powerful Urshifu V and Urshifu VMAX cards, along with supporting cast for both of them in the Urshifu VMAX decks. I think there is copies of Houndooms, Single Strike Energies, Rapid Strike Energies. You have the pieces of a coherent strategy that you can buy maybe 10, 15 cards and replace them, and you have a competitively viable deck. And at battle level 3, you've got the League Battle deck, which has our Mew VMAX deck, which you can literally pick 2 of these up, and you're walking into a tournament, and you've got yourself a competitively viable deck, which is crazy, because you can't do that with any other game, and this deck could easily win you a regionals. Now, this all happened because the death of Expanded. The Expanded format was a secondary format that ran alongside the standard format, but allowed cards from the Black and White expansion onwards. And now, for those of you who are keeping track, Black and White TCG came out in about 2011. So that's about 12 years of Pokemon cards that are competitively viable. Now, this format was often not very much played, but cards were very hard to find, and there were some very expensive staples. This is a modern day look at one of the expanded lists that won regionals in 2019. The cards and the prices have dropped significantly, obviously due to there not being any competitive tournaments, but even with all the prices being dropped, $173.61 is what you would need to build an expanded deck today when the format doesn't even exist. So you have to just imagine how much these cards would have costed if the tournaments were still going on, if these cards were still viable and competitively, but Expanded has made its way out of the competitive circuit, and there are 0 premier events in the 2022 to 2023 competitive season, meaning that maybe Expanded goes away forever, maybe it comes back in a rehashed manner, but the price of the game overall has gone down because it's a format we don't have to worry about. Now, this brings us to the current standard format. This is all the competitive players need to care about, whether you're attending a local tournament, whether you're attending an international tournament, it doesn't matter, this is all we're playing with. We are using Sword and Shield onwards cards until April 2023, when the D block will rotate. On the bottom left of each card, there's now a letter regulation mark that will tell you which block a card is a part of. Now, we're going to be rotating by blocks as opposed to sets, but for the most part, most sets have an individual letter card. The game is the cheapest it's ever been to play, with multiple Tier 1 decks under $100. And, well, if you're a newer player trying to figure out how to play, there's so much information available to you on any given website. You can go to limitlesstcg.com, where the top decks from the last event, regional event, or international event will be listed, deck list, the player, and, well, you can literally see this exact image here with the price point, and you can click on all of these links, go to TCG Player, and order this exact deck, this Regigigas deck that plays top 8 at the Arlington Regional Championships. Well, I can add this entire deck to my cart for $43.41. That seems pretty good, and then you can go from there. Looking at some of the other Tier 1 decks in this current format, Lost Zone Box, a deck that has been doing very, very well in the last couple tournaments, $35.51. Mew Genesect, the deck that we've talked about already, given the battle theme decks, $50.73. Every one of these tier 1 decks has been under $60 US. Now, the lone exception to this rule is Lugia Archeops. When a new flashy deck usually comes out, that deck might be a little bit expensive, seeing that the Lugias and Lugia V-Stars combined make up about $70, and this Radiant Charizard that's a little bit hard to find in the Pokemon Go set makes up about $30 of that. $100 come from 7 cards, and the remaining 53 cards, well, that's $40. That's $40 in the entirety of the entire deck. So, barring some of these little bit of expensive players, the game is really easy to play. Now, the video wouldn't be complete if I don't compare this to Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh! And their top decks right now. So I did a little bit of research, and I was looking at the standard events in the Magic metagame. I'm not looking at Expanded, I'm not looking at Modern, like whatever their other formats are, Commander, etc. I'm just only looking at Standard because I'm comparing Pokemon Standard to Yu-Gi-Oh! Standard to Magic Standard. Now, given these major events in the last 60 days, we saw this meta share in a lot of these decks. Now, I don't know what they do because I'm not a Magic player, apologies, but Grixis midrange, Mono White midrange, Esper midrange, Grixis Sacrifice, and Red Deck Wins were all in the top 5 decks in terms of meta share percentage, which is what I wanted to look at. Now, you can see the average price of the deck looking at TCG player lows here. Grixis midrange, which made up 27.72% of the meta share at 214 decks played, is $484 to build. Mono White midrange, $280 to build. Esper midrange is $551. Grixis Sacrifice at $388, and the cheapest of the bunch, a Red Deck Wins, $111. Now, if $111 is on the cheap end, well, that's almost quadruple what a Pokemon deck would be at the cheap end. So that's why we're cheaper than Magic. Now, looking at Yu-Gi-Oh! As well, I looked at the top decks from the last 6 months of Yu-Gi-Oh! Competitive play and their prices at tournaments and their usage. Tier Limits is one of the newer decks, I believe, that's come out, and it's the most used deck right now at 85 counts in the last 6 months, and the average price of the deck on TCG Player is $377.41. Sprite is $338.62, Floandries $318.13, Synchro $425.96, Exo Sister $389.83, Soul Sword at $258 and a cent, Adventurer $388.40, Branded at $220.62, Bestial at $421.17, and MathMech $180.99. Sorry. So the cheapest Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck on this list comes at $180, which is more expensive than the most expensive Pokemon deck at the current format. So that should speak volumes by itself. So, in conclusion, right now if you want to enter the Pokemon trading card game and play, you could pick up multiple Tier 1 decks if you're an indecisive person for less than $60 each. You could pick up the staples for a lot of these decks, and, the engines. Maybe pick up Lost Box, maybe pick up Regigigas. That's a total of $70 that you're putting into your cart. Pick up Mew VMAX, well, now you're up to $120. That's 3 Tier 1 decks that you can play with now for $120. This is the cheapest the Pokemon trading card game has ever been. Content is readily available on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch.tv, all these places you can go and absorb a lot of content from top players that'll break down the metagame, help you learn as quickly as possible, and you can be tournament ready in a matter of weeks. Information is so prevalent, and there are online tournament circuits on Play.Limitless TCG that you can even enter if you've got a PTCGO or Play TCG Live account. And you can even take these to your locals, because I know locals are coming back. People are going weekly to hit up their tournaments and get that exposure. So all things considered, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Pokemon is the cheapest trading card game of all of the competitive trading card games, and I hope you guys have a chance to play and let me know what decks that you're probably going to be playing. So thank you, I hope you enjoyed this content. Please like and subscribe, it helps the channel out a ton, and until next time.